Okay, so today
Mm.
we are going to take a deep dive into
Yeah.
this idea of self-esteem,
Okay.
and we're going to look at it from
Oh.
the perspective of some Japanese sources that we have.
Okay.
And what's interesting is that they're presenting this concept
Okay.
of self-esteem
Mm-hmm.
not as like one big thing,
Right.
but as these 6 distinct feelings
Oh, interesting.
that all kind of work together. So
Oh.
I'm really interested to kind of break this down.
Yeah, well, I can tell you that what I found fascinating is that they get pretty specific, these sources.
Okay.
It's not just about like, oh, feel good about yourself.
Right.
It's like, no, we've got these 6 components
Okay.
and they all work together.
Okay. So hit me with it.
All right, so we've got self-respect, self-acceptance, self-efficacy,
Okay.
self-trust,
Mm-hmm.
self-determination,
Okay.
and a sense of usefulness.
Okay. That's a lot to unpack.
Yeah, well, one of the sources breaks it down really nicely with this analogy of a tree.
Ooh, I love a good analogy.
Me too.
So how does self-esteem grow into a tree?
Okay, so you know how a tree has all these different parts? The roots, the trunk, the branches, leaves, flowers, the fruit it bears.
Right?
Well, they're saying it's the same with self-esteem.
Okay, but isn't that, I don't know, oversimplifying things a little bit? I mean,
Right.
self-esteem feels way more complex than a tree.
Oh, for sure. It's more nuanced
Okay.
than just saying self-esteem is like a tree.
Yeah.
But if you break it down,
Okay.
it really works.
Okay, I'm listening.
So, for example, think about the roots of a tree.
Okay.
Those roots are super important.
Yeah, they anchor it down.
Yeah, they anchor it, they pull in all the nutrients and water.
Right.
So they're really the foundation.
Okay.
And it's the same with self-respect.
Okay.
It's like the foundation of self-esteem.
Great.
It's that deep down belief
Okay.
in your inherent worth.
Mm-hmm.
And the Japanese term for this is jisong kanjo.
Okay, jisong kanjo. So what would that look like?
So as an adult,
Mm-hmm.
you know, we face so many situations where our self-respect can be challenged.
Oh, yeah,
Ageism in the workplace, societal
Yes.
pressures to conform, all that stuff.
for sure.
And having strong jisung kanjo helps us stay grounded.
So it's not just like this fluffy feel-good concept.
Right.
It actually helps
Actually,
deal with real-life challenges.
exactly. It equips you
Okay.
to face those things.
That's cool.
And then if you think about the trunk of the tree,
Okay, yeah, moving up
yeah, moving up.
from the roots.
So the trunk, that's what gives the tree its stability.
Right, the support.
Yeah, it helps it weather the storms.
Okay.
And they're saying self-acceptance is like that.
Yeah.
It's about embracing yourself, flaws and all.
Okay.
Recognizing that those imperfections are actually
All right.
part of what makes you unique.
That's interesting, but
Mhm.
I don't know, does that kind of clash with our culture's obsession
Right.
with self-improvement? It seems like we're always being told we need to be better, do more, achieve more.
Oh, absolutely.
Mhm.
And the sources actually acknowledge that
Yes.
tension, that it's there.
Okay.
But they argue that true self-acceptance
Okay.
isn't about complacency.
Okay.
It's not about just like, oh, I'm perfect the way I am, I don't need to change.
Right.
It's about recognizing that you are inherently worthy,
Okay.
regardless of your achievements or your perceived flaws.
Mm-hmm.
It's about looking at your tree and saying, hey, those crooked branches and misshapen leaves, they're still part of my tree,
Oh, okay. I see.
and they contribute to its overall beauty and resilience.
So finding that balance between striving for growth
Yeah,
and being okay with where you are right now.
exactly. It's like recognizing that your self-esteem tree
Mhm.
is already beautiful,
Okay.
even as it's still growing and evolving.
I like that.
Yeah.
Okay, so we've got the roots, we've got the trunk.
Mm.
What about the branches reaching out in all directions?
So those branches, they represent self-efficacy,
Okay.
which in Japanese is chikukurokukan.
Chikukukukan.
Yeah, and just as branches reach out for sunlight and growth,
Okay.
self-efficacy is your belief in your ability to achieve your goals,
Okay.
learn new things, navigate new situations confidently.
Okay.
It's that I can do this attitude
Right.
that helps you overcome challenges and take risks.
So as adults, we're
Yeah.
constantly facing new situations,
Right.
career changes,
Mhm.
family dynamics shifting,
Yeah,
aging parents, all that.
all of that.
Having a strong sense of self-efficacy, I can see how that would be helpful.
Absolutely makes all the difference
Okay.
in how we approach those transitions.
But what about when you face setbacks?
Hmm.
Doesn't that shake your self-efficacy?
Oh, of course, everyone experiences setbacks.
Right.
But having that foundational belief in your capabilities.
Okay.
Helps you reframe those setbacks
Okay.
as opportunities for learning and growth.
Okay.
So instead of saying, oh, I failed, you say, okay, what can I learn from this?
So it's not about avoiding failure,
Right.
but about changing how you relate to it.
Exactly. It's about building resilience.
Okay. Resilience. I like that.
Yeah. And that brings us to the leaves of our self-esteem tree.
Okay. The leaves.
Yeah, which represents self-trust.
Oh.
Or Jiko Shinrai-kan in Japanese.
Jiku Shinrai-kan.
And just as leaves provide energy for the tree to grow.
Right. Through photosynthesis and all that.
Exactly. Self-trust is the fuel that keeps you going, especially when you're facing those challenges.
Okay. So I can see how that ties back into self-efficacy.
Oh, absolutely.
You know, if you trust yourself,
Yeah.
you're more likely to believe in your ability to handle those tough situations.
Yeah, they're really intertwined. Self-trust and self-efficacy.
Okay.
When you trust your judgment, your
Right.
ability to make decisions that are aligned with your values, you're more likely to feel confident in achieving your goals.
It's like a positive feedback loop.
It is, totally.
Okay, this is making a lot of sense.
Good.
So we've got the roots, the trunk, the branches, the leaves. What about the flowers? Those beautiful flowers.
Ah, yes, the flowers.
Yeah.
So they represent self-determination.
Okay.
Or jiko ketikan in Japanese.
Okay, jiko kitekan.
Yeah, and you know how flowers kind of symbolize beauty and choice?
Yeah.
It's like that feeling of being in control of your choices
Okay.
and your life's direction.
So you're the author of your own story.
Exactly. Making decisions that feel true to yourself,
Okay.
even if they go against societal expectations.
Okay, I see.
And as we get older,
Yeah.
it's easy to fall into certain patterns,
Oh, yeah.
to feel like our choices are limited.
Yeah, you get stuck in a rut.
You do.
Yeah.
And cultivating that self-determination
Right.
helps you break free from those constraints and create a life that really reflects your values.
So it's like choosing what kind of flowers you want to grow in your garden.
Exactly.
Instead of just accepting whatever someone else planted there.
I love that. That's a great way to put it.
Okay, but it's not about being selfish.
Right. That's a good point.
Like isolating yourself.
And the sources are very clear about that.
Okay.
They're not saying
Okay.
self-determination is about being selfish or isolating yourself.
Okay.
It's about recognizing that you have a unique contribution to make to the world.
Okay.
And that contribution is most powerful when it comes from a place of authenticity and self-awareness.
So it's about finding that sweet spot between honoring your own needs
Yeah.
and recognizing your interconnectedness with others.
Exactly.
Okay, that makes sense.
And that brings us to the final element of our self-esteem tree,
All right, I'm hooked.
the fruit it bears.
Okay, what do the fruits represent?
So think about it. The fruit of a tree
Yeah.
provides nourishment, sustenance.
Right.
And they're saying a sense of usefulness is kind of like that.
Okay.
It comes from knowing that your actions,
Mhm.
your presence, your very being,
Okay.
makes a positive impact on the world around you.
So like when you volunteer your time or mentor someone at work or even just do something kind for a stranger.
Those are great examples.
Yeah.
And you feel like you're making a difference,
Yeah.
however small.
Yeah. It feels good.
It does, and the sources highlight how this becomes especially important as we get older.
Okay.
You know, as we move beyond the stage of building careers and families,
All right.
many adults start to question their purpose, their sense of value,
Yeah, that makes sense.
and cultivating that jiko yugyuka.
Zika Yugo-kan.
Yeah, that feeling of being useful
Yeah.
can be incredibly fulfilling and empowering.
It's like your self-esteem tree is bearing fruit.
Exactly.
And it's not only nourishing yourself, but it's also nourishing those around you.
It becomes this beautiful cycle of giving and receiving.
I like that.
And that's one of the key takeaways from these sources.
Okay.
Self-esteem isn't just about how you feel about yourself.
Mhm.
It's about how you relate to the world around you.
Okay, so we've looked at all 6 feelings, how they fit into this tree analogy.
Yeah.
But are these feelings all equally important, or are some kind of more foundational than others?
That's a great question.
Yeah.
And that's something the sources definitely address.
Okay.
They talk about how these feelings are all connected.
Okay.
They influence and support each other.
Gotcha.
And that's something we'll definitely dive into after a quick break.
Okay, sounds good.
Yeah. So before the break, you asked about how these 6 feelings are related.
Yeah, we talked about them individually,
Right.
but the sources are emphasizing that they're all connected.
Yeah, exactly. They're not just separate branches on a tree.
Okay.
They're intertwined.
Right.
They influence each other, support each other.
Okay.
One article even used the term kankisei, which basically means interconnectedness.
Nakangese.
Yeah, and they're arguing that when one of these feelings is damaged,
Okay.
It can weaken the entire tree.
Okay, so what would that look like in real life?
Okay, let's say you have a big career setback.
Okay.
You get passed over for a promotion, or your company downsizes, and you lose your job.
Yeah.
That can be a real blow to your self-efficacy, that jiko kucho kukan.
Right, that belief in your ability to achieve goals.
Exactly.
Yeah.
You might start to doubt your skills, your judgment.
It's like those branches of your self-esteem tree get pruned back,
Yeah,
and you're
exactly.
suddenly not reaching as high.
And because these feelings are all interconnected,
Right.
that dip in self-efficacy can then impact your self-trust.
Yep.
Jiko Shinraika.
Okay.
You start to second-guess yourself, hesitate to take on new challenges.
Right, even if they're exciting opportunities.
Exactly. And this can be a slippery slope,
Yeah, especially as we get older.
especially as we get older.
The sources talk about how low self-esteem can become a real issue in adulthood, right?
Absolutely. It's not just teenage angst anymore.
Right.
And they highlight how low self-esteem can manifest in very specific ways as we age.
Okay, like what?
Well, you might find yourself constantly comparing yourself to others.
Oh, yeah.
Your career trajectory, your relationship status, your home, even your kids' accomplishments.
Yes, it's like everyone's posting their highlight reel on social media,
Totally.
and you're left feeling like you're not measuring up.
Yeah, even if you're objectively successful.
Right, exactly.
And that constant comparison game can really erode your self-respect, your Jason Kanjo.
Okay.
You start to question your worth,
Right.
feeling like you're not good enough,
Mm-hmm.
even though those comparisons are often based on superficial or incomplete information.
It's like you're judging your whole tree based on the size of one leaf compared to someone else's.
That's a great way to put it.
Right.
It's a totally distorted view.
Totally.
And what's even more insidious is that this comparison game can then fuel a need for external validation.
Okay.
You start seeking approval from others to try to boost your self-esteem.
Instead of finding that validation from within.
Exactly. It's like you're looking to others to water your self-esteem tree.
Yeah. Right.
Instead of tapping into your own wellspring of self-worth.
Yeah, and that can become a vicious cycle, right?
It can. The more you rely on external validation,
Mm-hmm.
the less you trust your own judgment.
Mm-hmm.
And the more vulnerable you become to those external forces
Mm.
that can really undermine your self-esteem.
So you're giving away your power to those external forces
Yeah,
instead of reclaiming it for yourself.
exactly. And that's where cultivating self-determination, that jikokerekan, becomes so crucial.
Right, okay.
It's about recognizing that you have the right to make choices that feel authentic to you,
Okay.
even if
Yeah.
they go against the grain or challenge societal expectations.
It's like taking back the watering can and choosing what kind of nourishment you give your self-esteem tree.
I love that analogy.
Right.
It's really about taking back your power.
So we've talked about how setbacks and societal pressures can impact our self-esteem, but what about the positive side?
Right.
The sources talk about how strengthening one feeling can positively influence the others, right?
Exactly. It's not all doom and gloom.
Okay. Yeah.
Just like damaging one part of the tree can weaken the whole thing,
Right.
nurturing one part can make the whole tree stronger and more resilient.
Okay.
One article had this great example
Okay.
about how reflecting on past successes can boost your self-efficacy.
Okay.
They use the term seek taken, which basically means successful experiences.
Oh, I like that.
Yeah.
It's like taking a moment to appreciate how much your self-esteem tree has already grown.
Exactly.
You look back at all those branches you've grown, all those challenges you've overcome.
Yeah.
It gives you confidence to keep reaching higher.
Exactly. It's about recognizing those moments when you were successful,
Mm-hmm.
when you took risks and achieved something meaningful,
Okay.
even if it was something small.
Right.
Think about that project you aced at work,
Okay.
or that time you finally learned to play that instrument you always wanted to try.
Mm-hmm.
Those are all examples of successful experiences
Right.
that can nourish your self-efficacy.
And that can be really helpful for those times when those self-doubt gremlins start whispering in your ear.
Oh, absolutely. When you're feeling unsure of yourself,
Yeah.
you can counter those negative thoughts with evidence of your own capabilities.
Right.
It's like
Mhm.
saying, hey, self-doubt, remember when I totally rocked that presentation? Yeah, I've got this.
It's like you're training those little gardeners of self-compassion
Mm-hmm.
to prune away those negative thoughts and focus on the positive growth.
I love that. That's a great image.
And this positive reinforcement doesn't have to come solely from our own internal reflections, right?
Right. It can also come from recognizing those moments when you've made a positive impact on others,
Okay.
when you've been helpful, supportive, or even just a listening ear.
Like those moments when you see the fruit of your self-esteem tree ripening
Yeah,
and nourishing those around you.
exactly.
Like, remember that time you mentored someone at work and they really thrived?
Mm-hmm.
Or that time you volunteered your time and felt that sense of deep satisfaction?
Those are great examples.
Right. Are.
Yeah.
And those experiences can really boost your sense of usefulness, that jiko yugokan.
Right.
And when you feel useful,
Oh.
when you know you're making a positive contribution,
Mm-hmm.
it can ripple outwards,
Okay.
strengthening your self-respect, your self-acceptance, even your self-determination.
Wow.
It becomes a beautiful cycle of interconnected growth.
It's like your self-esteem tree is not only strong and resilient on its own, but it's also connected to a whole forest of other trees, supporting and nourishing each other.
That is beautiful imagery.
Right.
And I think it captures the essence of what these sources are trying to convey.
Okay.
Self-esteem isn't just an individual pursuit.
Okay.
It's something that flourishes within a web of relationships, connections, and contributions.
This is all making so much sense.
Good.
Okay, so we've talked about how these 6 feelings are interconnected,
Yeah.
how they can be weakened by setbacks and societal pressures.
And how they can be strengthened by reflecting on successes and recognizing our contributions.
Exactly.
But do the sources offer any specific tips for actually cultivating these feelings?
They do. They have tons of practical advice.
Okay, and that's what we'll be exploring right after this.
Okay.
Okay, so I'm ready for those tips. I'm ready to hear what the Japanese sources have to say about actually cultivating these 6 feelings that make up self-esteem.
Right, because it's one thing to understand it, but it's another to actually put it into practice.
All right, exactly.
Luckily, these sources are full of practical advice.
Okay, so let's say someone's listening to this and thinking, okay, my self-esteem tree could use a little TLC.
Right.
Where do I even start?
Well, I think one of the most fundamental practices they emphasize is self-reflection.
Okay.
But not just any self-reflection.
Sure.
It's about being really intentional.
Okay.
About reflecting on your values, your strengths, your accomplishments. One article uses the phrase jikorikai, which basically translates to self-understanding.
Okay. Jikuzukai.
Yeah, and they argue that before you can even start building your self-esteem, you need to have a clear enough standing of who you are at your core.
So it's like taking an inventory of your self-esteem tree.
I think so.
You know, really examining each branch and leaf
Yeah.
to see what's thriving and what might need a little extra attention.
And that process of jikorikai can involve things like journaling, meditation,
Oh.
even just taking some quiet time to sit with yourself and ask some big questions.
Okay, like what kind of questions?
Like, what are your core values? What are your unique talents and skills? What are you most proud of accomplishing in your life so far?
And I imagine this process of self-reflection can be especially helpful for adults who might be feeling a bit lost or directionless.
Oh, absolutely.
Maybe you've hit a certain point in your career or personal life where you're feeling like, okay, what's next?
Right, and the sources really emphasize that self-reflection isn't a one-time thing.
Okay.
It's an ongoing practice. You know, as we age, our values, our priorities, even our sense of self can evolve.
Right.
So it's important to keep checking in with ourselves.
Yeah, to make sure we're still on the right path.
Exactly, to make sure our self-esteem tree is still growing in a direction that feels authentic and fulfilling.
So it's like giving your self-esteem tree a regular checkup.
I love that analogy.
Wow.
Pruning away any dead branches, making sure the roots are still strong.
Yes.
And then, once you have a better understanding of your core self, you can start to cultivate those specific feelings that might need a little boost.
Okay, so let's get into some specific tips.
Okay,
Let's start with self-respect.
All right, Jisen Kanjo.
Yeah, those strong roots that anchor our self-esteem tree.
Right, the foundation.
What do these Japanese sources have to say about strengthening that sense of self-worth?
Well, one practice they emphasize is setting healthy boundaries.
Okay, that's something we touched on earlier.
Yeah, we did.
But it can be so hard to do.
Oh, I can.
Especially for people pleasers.
Right.
Or those of us who have been conditioned to put others' needs before our own.
Absolutely, and the sources actually address that.
Okay, good.
They talk about the importance of practicing assertiveness.
Okay.
Not in an aggressive way, but in a way that clearly and calmly communicates your needs and your limits.
So you're not being a doormat.
Right. You're standing up for yourself.
Okay.
but you're doing it in a way that respects yourself and others.
Gotcha.
One article even used this term,
Okay.
kojo.
Kojo.
Yeah, which they describe as a kind of firm gentleness.
Okay, firm gentleness. I like that.
Yeah, it's about being assertive but also kind.
So it's like you're pruning back those invasive branches that are encroaching on your self-esteem tree,
Yeah.
creating space for it to grow strong and tall.
That's a great way to visualize it.
And what other tips do they have for cultivating self-respect?
Well, another important tip is to be mindful of your self-talk. The way we talk to ourselves has a huge impact on how we feel about ourselves.
Yeah, that makes sense.
If you're constantly criticizing yourself, putting yourself down, comparing yourself to others,
Right.
you're essentially poisoning the roots of your self-esteem tree.
It's like you're neglecting those little gardeners of self-compassion and letting the weeds of self-doubt take over.
Exactly. So they encourage us to practice more positive and encouraging self-talk.
Okay, so instead of saying, I'm such a failure,
Right.
what should I be saying?
Try saying something like, okay, I made a mistake, but I'm learning from it.
Okay.
Or instead of saying, I'm not good enough.
Right, which I think a lot of us probably say to ourselves.
Yeah, a lot of us do.
Yeah.
Try saying, I'm worthy of love and respect just as I am.
So it's about being your own best cheerleader,
Exactly.
celebrating your wins,
Yes.
and offering yourself grace when you stumble.
And that kind of positive self-talk can then have a ripple effect.
Okay.
Not only on your self-respect, but also on your self-acceptance, your jiko-juken.
Right, that trunk of the tree.
Exactly.
Okay, so how do we cultivate more self-acceptance?
Well, one suggestion is to focus on your strengths.
Okay.
Instead of dwelling on your perceived flaws,
Mm-hmm.
take some time to appreciate those qualities that make you unique and special.
Okay.
Think about what you're good at, what are your passions, what brings you joy.
So it's like taking a step back from your self-esteem tree and admiring its overall beauty
Exactly.
instead of getting hyper-focused on one little knot in the bark.
I love that. That's a great way to think about it.
And I imagine gratitude plays a role here too, right?
Absolutely. The sources talk a lot about the importance of practicing gratitude.
Okay.
Take some time each day to appreciate the good things in your life, big or small.
Mm-hmm.
It could be your health, your family, your friends, a beautiful sunset, a delicious meal.
Mm-hmm.
When you shift your focus to what you're grateful for,
Yeah.
it can help you see yourself and your life in a more positive and accepting light.
It's like you're nourishing your self-esteem tree with all the good stuff,
Exactly.
giving it the energy it needs to grow strong and healthy.
And, all of these practices,
Mm-hmm.
the self-reflection, the positive self-talk, the gratitude,
Mm-hmm.
they can also have a really powerful impact on your self-efficacy, your jikokukukanan.
Right, those branches reaching out for growth.
Exactly, because when you have a clear understanding of your values and your strengths,
Okay.
when you're speaking to yourself kindly and encouragingly,
Mm-hmm.
and when you're focused on the good things in your life,
Yeah.
it naturally boosts your belief in your ability to achieve your goals and overcome challenges.
It's like you're giving those branches of your self-esteem tree the support they need to reach higher and wider.
Exactly.
Okay, so we've talked about self-respect, self-acceptance, self-efficacy.
Mm-hmm.
What about self-determination, that Jiko Kitikan? How do we cultivate that feeling of being in control of our choices in our lives?
Well, one really practical tip the sources offer is to set small, achievable goals. You don't have to make drastic changes overnight.
Right, small steps.
Small steps.
Okay.
Instead, focus on taking small steps that move you in the direction you want to go.
So it's like you're carefully pruning and shaping your self-esteem tree,
Yes.
one branch at a time,
Yeah.
instead of trying to uproot the whole thing and start over.
Exactly. So maybe you want to start eating healthier.
Okay.
So you commit to adding one more serving of fruits or vegetables to your diet each day.
Okay, I can do that.
Or maybe you want to be more active.
Mhm.
So you start by taking a 15-minute walk each morning.
Okay,
The key is to set realistic goals that you can actually achieve.
right.
And then when you achieve them,
Yeah,
it gives you a sense of accomplishment.
right. That feels good.
It does. And it motivates you to keep going.
And those small wins can then fuel your self-trust.
Absolutely. Your Jiko Shinraikan.
Yeah.
When you set a goal and you achieve it,
Mm-hmm.
it reinforces that belief in your ability to follow through on your commitments.
It's like you're strengthening those leaves of your self-esteem tree,
Yes.
giving them the energy they need to soak up the sun and support the growth of the whole tree.
That's a beautiful image.
Okay, and last but not least, how do we cultivate that sense of usefulness that Chico Yuokan?
So for that one, The sources suggest finding ways to contribute to something larger than yourself.
Okay.
It could be volunteering your time, donating to a cause you care about, or just being more present and supportive in your relationships.
Right, so it doesn't have to be this big, grand gesture.
It doesn't. It can be those small, everyday acts of kindness and connection.
It's like you're sharing the fruits of your self-esteem tree with others,
Yeah,
nourishing not only yourself, but also those around you.
exactly. And the sources point out that this act of giving back can then have a reciprocal effect on your self-esteem.
Oh, interesting. How so?
Well, when you know that you're making a positive difference,
Yeah.
it can boost your self-respect, your sense of belonging,
Mm.
even your overall sense of purpose. It creates a beautiful cycle of interconnectedness and growth.
Wow, this has been such an insightful deep dive.
It
I
has.
feel like we've really explored this concept of self-esteem from a unique Japanese perspective.
I agree.
And what's really resonated with me is this idea that self-esteem isn't just about feeling good about yourself.
Right.
It's about understanding how these 6 distinct feelings work together
Mm-hmm.
to create a strong and resilient sense of self.
Yeah.
A self that can weather challenges,
Yeah,
embrace imperfections, and contribute to the world in a meaningful way.
absolutely. And I think one of the most empowering takeaways from these Japanese sources is that cultivating self-esteem is an ongoing journey, not a destination. It's a process of self-discovery, self-acceptance, and self-nurturing.
It's like that self-esteem tree we've been talking about.
It is.
It needs time and care to grow strong and tall.
Right. And so do we.
And on that note, we encourage you to reflect on your own self-esteem tree.
Yeah.
What are your strengths? What are your values? Which branches need a little extra TLC?
Yeah. Think about those things.
And remember, even those crooked branches and misshapen leaves are part of what makes your tree uniquely beautiful.
They are.
Keep nurturing it, keep growing, and keep reaching for the sun.
I love that.
Thanks for joining us on this journey of self-discovery.